Today we're going to talk about preventative maintenance, and no, not the type you find in Consumer Reports or even in your owner's manual. Things that you need to know about your car. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Wizard Shop, and just like I just mentioned, today we're going to do a video on, and actually some of you gearheads out there might already know, there's problem engines, problems with different cars. It's like if you buy this car, you know up front you need to get this and this fixed because it's a failure point and these things need to be taken care of. There is a whole slew of cars that have these things that need to be taken care of before they break. But it always seems like that people wait until it breaks and causes double the damage or triple to finally solve it. And we're going to really push today that if you buy some of these cars we're going to mention, you should go ahead and get these things done, even if everything looks cherry, everything looks great. You're like, hey, I had this checked out with my mechanic, everything looks good. I don't care. You still need to do it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And no, it's not involving the smart car or the Dustbuster van, which you guys are going to get to see a video on. You definitely want to hit the subscribe button if you want to check out the Dustbuster van. So how do you know if a certain car you're looking at has inherent problems? One thing you can do is definitely Google it, or go to the Audi forums or Ferrari forums or whatever car it is you're looking at. What are some of the common faults with that particular model or make of car? We're going to go over a handful today, but there is tons more than what we're going to go over. Remember, some of the things we're going to reveal today are some of the problems that cars have you're not going to find on Consumer Reports. You're not going to find it on Consumer Reviews or any kind of website like that. They're not even going to mention those things, and they're not in your owner's manual, which we'll talk about with the Viper here in a little bit. But right now we're standing next to the Audi. You guys have seen this in the shop. The customer wanted to scrap this and throw it in the trash. We saved it. Actually, Danielson did. There's a link in the description. You can go to his channel and watch the work he did. It has fully rebuilt cylinder head and timing chains. Yuck. This is the 2.0 VW engine. So many of us already know with the 2.0, with VW or Audi, it doesn't matter if it's a Beetle or a Jetta, Passat, Q3, Q5, there's so many cars out there with these engines in them. The timing chains break over and over and over again by the hundreds of thousands. If you buy one of these vehicles and you know it has the 2.0 TSI turbo, it's definitely time to book an appointment with your mechanic and have them go ahead and do the timing chains. Don't wait until it breaks. Just go ahead and get it done. It'll save you a huge headache. If it does break, you may have to buy a new engine. If you're looking to buy one of these and the seller says, I don't know, I never had that done, then you can say, well, I'm going to have that done, and that's like $3 or $4 grand, bro. So, you're asking 15 for this car, I'll give you 12. Take it or leave it. That's how you bargain in this world. You know the inherent problems, and you're going to have to pay to get it fixed. So, keep that in mind. Now, some of the things we're going to go over today, some of them are as bad that it probably should be a recall. But most of the things that are severely bad, where it's like 80% of the cars, it's probably going to be a recall done on that. Some of the things we're mentioning today is a very high percentage that could be faulty. You probably should go ahead and do it just to err on the side of caution. And just like this Dustbuster van, which is a really sweet van, I really like these vans. This has the 3.8 V6 in it, which is bulletproof. It is an amazing engine. You guys know I've talked this thing up, drummed it up. It's such an awesome engine. There's tons of videos you can go watch about it. There are a couple things even with this engine that you should probably get done. Number one is the coolant elbows. Here's a picture of them. They actually reside underneath the power steering pump. There's a bracket in the back of the engine. You have to take it off, and then you can see the coolant elbows. They're plastic from the factory. They're notorious for cracking and breaking and dumping all your coolant on the ground while you're on your family vacation. It's always when it's least convenient. So do it now. Take care of it now. The picture I just showed you are the metal upgrade elbows. Once you put those in, it's solved. No more plastic elbows. Another problem is the plastic intake. With the EGR valve, they're known to actually melt through the plastic intake. They sell an upgraded intake that goes on. It's not a major job. It's not no $5,000 job. It's actually fairly cheap. But you can replace that preventatively and take care of that problem. Here sits before me another vehicle with common problems. This one has a 5.9 Cummins. We're not really getting into the engine, but it's here to have the dash removed and have the actuators and broken flaps fixed. Anybody that has this body style of Dodge will tell you, oh yeah, I had to have that done too. It seems like they all have to have that done. And there's a reason why they sell this kit right here. It changes the plastic cheap doors to metal doors, and they never break again. That's what we're going to be putting on to this one here. So if you buy one of this body style, whether it's a Hemi, a 4.7, a Cummins, I don't care what engine's in it, that doesn't change the dash, the internals in the dash. It's the same across all of them. If you buy one and you say, man, this thing's not changing from floor to vent or the temperature's not working, you can go ahead and plan on a dash out job. It's thousands of dollars. So while we're on the topic of trucks, you guys know that I also hate the Ford 5.4 3-valve Triton. I personally have replaced 15 of the engines at $7,000 a pop, and it's always because poor oil changes, or frequency with oil changes. The engine can be okay if you do good synthetic quality oil every 3,000 to 5,000 miles. But if you skimp on that and you're cheap and you go every 10 or 15, or I've seen 20,000 miles on some of those, the passages inside the block and all kinds of things get clogged. Where the rocker arms go will just be sludge, and that engine's ruined. It starts doing the clacking, the cam phaser, and you can put new cam phasers on and it still does it. Shop I worked at before, we did the cam phasers and timing chains for about 3 or 4 vehicles worth. All of them came back clacking again. Even with the upgraded oil pump, we did all the things you're supposed to do, and they still came back clacking. And at the time, the shop owner, which is one of my mentors, made an ultimatum: from here on out, they will get a new engine or they can get out of my shop. It's just that simple. This is one of those that you need to be religious with your maintenance, the oil changes, on time, like clockwork. And it can extend the life of the engine. They can be okay. Unfortunately, there's so many that they're workhorses, they're used to hauling stuff, and they really don't last very long. And it turns into, I didn't want to do the $50 or $100 oil change, now I get to do the $7,000 engine. So keep that in mind. Another vehicle that you can plan on doing timing chains on is any of the Buick Enclave, Terrain, Chevy Traverse. There's tons of different models with the GM 3.6. Now I know some people have commented, hey, I have one of those with 150,000 miles and it's doing fine, so you're wrong, Car Wizard. No, I'm not wrong. You just got lucky. That's all. There are so many of the owners of these cars that I've had them in the shop, and I quote them what it's going to take to do the job, engine out job, and they're like, no, I'm just going to sell this thing. The 3.6, if you buy one and timing chains haven't been done, there's a good 50 to 60% chance yours is going to fail. It will. Just go ahead and do it. And if you're not going to do it, sell the car before it breaks, because it is that bad of a problem. I've actually got people say, is it really that bad, Car Wizard? Yes, it is. Next one we're going to talk about is timing belts with Ferraris. No, they don't go 90,000 or 100,000 mile intervals. This is a 456, but it can apply to the 348, 355, 550, 360. There's quite a slew of Ferraris that have timing belts. They're usually 30,000 mile intervals. If you're buying a Ferrari and it's got 45,000 miles on it, and you ask the seller, has the timing belts been done? And they go, guess what? You get to do them. You need to budget for that. This is definitely not something to skimp on. This is preventative maintenance that prevents engine catastrophe. Oh, and by the way, there is 2 timing belts on these engines, one for the left, one for the right. But definitely needs to, it's actually not that hard of a job. On a 355, it's an engine out job. A 348. A 360 you can do with it in the car. This one you can do right here with the hood open. It's not that big of a deal. If you have one of the models that requires an engine out, it's not going to be a couple $1,000. It's going to be $6,000 or possibly $10,000, depending on what they find when they get your engine out. But definitely keep that in mind. If the seller doesn't have any service history for timing belts being done, which there's been a lot of Ferraris come through the shop that have 10 and 15 and 20-year-old belts on them. So you can't tell me, oh, people always take care of that. No, they don't. You don't want to get stuck with it. If you don't know for sure, maybe it's been done, maybe it's not, just go with maybe it's not. Here we have a really nice SL500, and it will be getting the convertible top hydraulics fully redone. There'll be a video on that as well. If you're looking at an R129 chassis, you can also bank on that. But really with any Mercedes, motor mounts, flex discs, transmission mount, fluid services, belts, things of that nature, you really can bank on those things needing to be done, because usually they get skipped and then they break and they can cause a lot of damage. If it's running really rough and you can feel the vibration through the floor of the engine running, which most of the older ones have, the motor mounts are shot. So definitely want to keep an eye on those things on a Mercedes. There's a couple more models, makes here I'm going to mention in passing here. Any of the Chrysler vehicles with displacement on demand, which is where it can shut off cylinders, it's just good to go ahead and bank on getting that system deleted. Even if you're religious on the maintenance, even if you do oil changes on time, they still fail and wreck the engine block. The lifters can break, they can turn sideways and tear up the cam, tear up the block. They start making ticking noises and it can go south really, really fast. This is also true for the General Motors Active Fuel Management, or AFM. Anytime anyone buys one of these trucks or cars with this system in it and they say, what should I do? And I say, delete the system. You can either do it mechanically by buying the actual cams and lifters and things that does away with that. Keep in mind it's going to be $4,000 to $6,000 to get that done. The heads have to come off, regardless if it's Chrysler or General Motors. It is a big job. But you can also get software deletes that just goes in and turns that system off, so at least it's not actuating and risking breaking. But definitely, if you get one of those models, you should plan on finding a way to get that system deleted. It is very dangerous not to. It was a good idea when it was new, but after time passes and things start to fail, we realize the idea was good, the execution was not, and they used cheap parts and it doesn't last. The other one I'm going to mention is Land Rover Discovery 1 and 2. If the head gasket hasn't blown already, it's going to. Go ahead and get it done. Don't wait until you're on a family trip and it blows and you're like, man, I should have done this, I should have got this done. It's probably going to be $3 or $4 grand to pull the heads off, go through and upgrade the gaskets, bolts and everything. Maybe a little cheaper depending on what shop you go to. It could be $2,500, but it's not going to be $500. But it's definitely worth it to go ahead and get it done.
Wizard, we're filming.
Yes, I know we're filming, but the thing is I'm not seeing anything in here on the maintenance schedule that says anything about these overheat in traffic on a 100-degree day. Stock, they all will. Or at least they'll get to 240. They get into the scary, scary territory. There's nothing about that in here. Or consumer reports. This is where you watch videos like this or research it on Google. What are the common issues with the car? This one has had the upgrade. It has the larger, I think it's the 98, 99, 2000 large fan. And it's had a radiator upgrade and a few other things. So now I can turn on the AC, which makes the fans run, and it can be 100 degrees out. It stays at 195, 200 all the time. Another thing is, which is not in here, nothing in here says that the brake proportions on this car is 70% in the front and 30 in the rear. That's horrible. And the reason why is the tiny little caliper right here. There is a fix I'm looking to do with the Tom's 40mm upgrade, which changes it from about 60-40, somewhere around in there, which is a lot better. You can also do the $5,000 or $6,000 big brake upgrade, which really improves the braking, but that's a lot of money. But again, you can read this till you're blue in the face. You will see nothing about that. So definitely do your research. If you're looking at a Gen 1 Viper, those are a couple of things you can plan on upgrading. It's preventative maintenance. We're preventing disaster. So in front of me is a Porsche Tiptronic transmission. No, it's not a CVT, but I'm going to be on the topic of CVT. That's another area where if you have a Toyota, a Nissan, Hyundai, I don't care what brand it is. If you have a CVT transmission, you should service it with a filter and fluid every 50,000 miles. I don't care what your manual says. I don't care what your service advisor at so-and-so dealership says. You should service it every 50,000 miles because the CVTs, especially the Jatco Nissan ones, are also in the Jeep Patriots. They're known to blow up prematurely, especially if they've not been serviced. But they can be lengthened and last quite a while if you service them. This is one of those scenarios where you check your owner's manual or you talk to a service advisor at a dealership and they'll say, nah, bro, you're good. You're good for 150,000 miles. And the answer to that, no, you're not. Go get an Altima with a CVT transmission from the early 2000s and take it to 150,000 miles. You'll go through 3 transmissions to get there. They can last if they're serviced. There's been a lot of CVTs that I serviced in the shop. When I drain the fluid, it's like, oh my goodness, this is like dark midnight oil. It's so dark and it smells burned. Definitely service your CVT. So while we're here, behind me is a 996 Porsche 911 Carrera. And yes, we're going to talk about the IMS bearing. So as you just saw, the transmission has to come out to do this job. And this is a Tiptronic, which is twice as long as the manual. I can have a manual out of here really quick on a 911. The Tiptronic is a different story. You have to take way up here the intake tubes off to take the starter off so you can get to the torque converter bolts. Because as you can see, there is no access to get to the torque converter bolts except through the starter hole. But what we're talking about is this little guy right here with these 3 bolts. That is a bearing in there that holds an intermediate shaft for the timing chain system. And if you watch Hoovie's Garage and you've seen Apollo 911, his engine grenaded, it had glitter all in the oil. It would destroy the engine. It was specifically from this bearing. The failure rate on these, probably 20 to 30%, maybe a little higher. There are some on the road with high miles that they never failed. But why do you want to wait to chance it that it will fail and destroy your engine? When they do go bad and when they send pieces all inside the engine, it's done. The cost to rebuild one of these engines is the same as just buying a new one. So if that goes bad, very likely it's a new engine, which the engine itself could be 10 or 15,000 just for the engine. That doesn't include the labor or anything. We've done multiples of these here at Omega, and we always use the LN Engineering upgraded bearing kit. This is ceramic bearing here and the upgraded little carrier piece there. This right here, just this little group of parts right here, is almost $1,000. This tiny little bearing, which is inside of there right now, the old one, will kill your engine. That's a promise. It will kill your engine if it fails. This customer is wise. They just bought this car, they really enjoy the car, and they said, my IMS bearing hasn't failed, but I don't care how much it cost. I want to do it now. And it's going to be like $4 or $5 grand just for the IMS bearing. It's a lot of hours to get the transmission out. The kit is expensive. Everything on this is not cheap. We're also going to do the rear main seal while we're at it, since we have all this apart. There's a lot of while you're there things to do while you have all this apart. So if you're buying a Boxster, a 986 or a 996, it's basically the same engine. The bore and things are a little different. But the IMS failure is equally problematic between all those models. Late 90s, early 2000s, go and get your IMS bearing replaced before it breaks. You can see there's quite a lot of cars in the shop, and even with all these cars here, I could go on for another 3 or 4 hours with common faults with cars. So you definitely need to do your research. Hopefully some of these we've listed will help you guys out, but I'm just giving you an idea that there is a great number of cars and trucks and SUVs out there with inherent failure points. If you buy one and you know it has that failure point, go ahead and get it taken care of. Don't wait until it breaks. The internet is definitely your friend in this case. Google, Bing, whoever it is that you want to use. You can find the information before you buy or even after you buy. What can I expect that I need to do to this car to make it safe? Again, there's a link in the description to go check out Danielson's videos on that Audi. There's also Ferrari videos, all kinds of cool stuff. Really cool channel there. Make sure you check that out. Make sure to hit the subscribe button as well. There's a lot of really good videos and things coming. There's the Dustbuster van. We got a full schedule. And also, don't forget to check my Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut. Thanks for watching.